Welcome to Celebrating Act Two. Celebrating Act Two is the user manual for the second half of your life.
Welcome, everybody, with Manny Pacheco, Celebrating Act Two's resident expert in Hollywood and film and history and all that kind of stuff. Right, Art?
Manny, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be back on Celebrating Act Two.
Thank you. So I have a question for you. We had a lot of people who've passed this year, as we do every year in the industry. The one that was of particular notice to me was Kirk Douglas.
Well, that's a big...
uniquely.
Well, he's a giant among the, if you want to talk about the pantheon of terrific actors, I mean, he's right up there with Henry Fonda, Humphrey Bogart, Cary Grant, and of course his contemporaries, folks like Burt Lancaster, Robert Mitchum, and he also was mentor to great actors that followed. Gene Hackman comes to mind. So yeah, Kirk Douglas is one of the giants. Came around right when film noir became popular, and so he embraced the anti-hero. Of course, the anti-hero became very popular after World War II. And it was created and born out of film noir, where you have a character who actually wants to win the day, but he rues his life because he ends up with a femme fatale or some sort of a bad guy finally gets him in the end. But he does something heroic right before he dies. And Kirk Douglas, there was just nobody better at playing the anti-hero.
He had such a long career. Of course, he lived a long time, that's why, but he had such a long career, and he was a producer, a significant producer, contributor to content, as well as an actor. But his acting career seemed to live forever.
Yeah, because he found his niche. He was very popular, well-liked, and people wanted to work with him. I mean, when he started actually producing films like Spartacus, it comes to mind, just about everybody wanted to be in a film with Kirk Douglas. And one of his characters, played by Peter Ustinov, actually won an Academy Award for his role in Spartacus. So yeah, everybody liked working with the guy. He was a very physical, rugged actor. When you see some of those moments where he gets involved in, let's say, a fight with a gangster, or he beats up a woman, as they do in film noir, the female actors actually liked his rugged approach. They were really into it, so it worked for him. And that anti-hero character really shined from the late 40s to the 1950s. I would say the character was carved out of the work of Kirk Douglas and Robert Mitchum. They're really the ones that set the table. I would probably throw in Alan Ladd as a third if you had to pick another. But they really set the table for folks like who came just later. Burt Lancaster was a real physical anti-hero type actor. And, they played these parts and they were interchangeable. In the movie 7 Days in May, Kirk Douglas got to play the squeaky clean hero, and they put Burt Lancaster as kind of the villain or anti-hero of the piece. So they would interchange their parts. I mean, you could just pick out movies where Kirk Douglas just played these really weaselly characters and somehow comes out on top at the end. The Bad and the Beautiful, Lust for Life. He was really good in a movie with John Wayne. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It escapes me. But In Harm's Way, that was the movie. And, he got to play these really kind of, not so nice characters, but people seem to root for the not so nice characters sometimes. Female audiences love those kinds of characters. And so Kirk Douglas was popular, with both demographics, male and female. And let me mention one other thing. One of the actors that he probably influenced the most, his son. If you look at the movie Wall Street, is there anybody more Weasley than Gordon Gekko?
Right.
And for his work, Michael Douglas won that Academy Award that eluded Kirk Douglas his entire career for playing a Kirk Douglas kind of character.
Yes. Yeah. Do you suppose there are any actors today here in the new millennium that fit that same kind of mold of the uh, Kirk Douglas, Lancaster guys.
Yeah, Leo DiCaprio comes to mind. I think he, never one of my favorites, but nobody can deny the fact that he's willing to take a part that's really interesting, sometimes duplicitous, and he plays it real well. I mean, if you look at The Aviator, that's a great example of a character you really don't care for that much, but you can't stop watching. Or the movie The Departed. Uh,
The
great,
Departed, great
yeah,
movie.
great
Yeah,
hero. I mean, the true hero of the piece is Matt Damon. But if you look at Leo DiCaprio's character, you go back in the 1930s or 40s, it would have been a part that James Cagney could have played very easily. So yeah, absolutely, DiCaprio comes to mind for sure.
Yeah,
yeah,
Cagney, another anti-hero
Yes, but he did it in
in
a
the early
different
days.
way.
Yeah,
Here's the thing about Cagney versus the Kirk Douglases and the Burt Lancasters. You always knew that Cagney was going to get it in the end. You don't always think that with Robert Mitchum or Kirk Douglas. Sometimes they get away with it, and for whatever reason, I think the closest that I can come to as far as an actor goes in a movie where you're not sure he's going to die at the end was Humphrey Bogart in The Maltese Falcon. That's where the real duplicitous character was born, the
yeah.
anti-hero. And yeah, and you don't think he's going to die in The Strange Loves of Martha Ivers, but yeah, he ends up cashing his chips in the end. So
yep.
Kirk Douglas wasn't afraid to die on screen, and he was just a really remarkable actor. I also want to mention one other thing about Kirk Douglas. For almost a decade, he tried to produce One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and never had a chance to do that. And he wanted to play the part that Jack Nicholson ended up playing. That would have been a great anti-hero part for him. He just couldn't get the finance together. He couldn't get all the marbles together. And so when he finally gave up, he left it to his son, who finally produced the movie, and it became one of the great movies of the 1970s. So the Douglas tradition lives on when it came to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Great, great.
I
Well,
find
may
that
he rest in peace.
I do find it kind of interesting because I know that uh, most of the many of the forgotten Hollywood stars who were heavies for most of their career would wind up doing things that were very lighthearted, like Cagney did
Right. Yankee Doodle
Yankee
Dandy. I
Doodle
mean, we
Dancer,
right.
and Walter Matthau, who was not particularly he was, I guess, a heavy sometimes, did all these fun movies at the end. So,
Absolutely.
did
Walter
Kirk?
Matthau is a great example. Yeah.
What about Kirk? Did he do any fun movies like that near the end of his career?
Well, he made a couple of movies with Burt Lancaster. A movie called Tough Guys comes to mind, and it's an out and out comedy. And they're both older. They're both trying to commit a crime, but clearly they're senior citizens, and the
Yes.
the new way of doing things just doesn't mesh with the way they used to. Of course, they went out with their tried and true ways. If I might add too, there's a great individual that I want to point out as an anti-hero who ended up in a really great movie. Played heavies actually earlier in his career when he was with Paramount. Robert Preston. Robert Preston always was a very very dependable bad guy, and he got to play one of the finest anti-heroes in a fun movie, The Music Man, as Professor Harold Hill. So there's another
That's
great example of an anti-hero in a musical.
great. Great look back. That's a great look back, and what a great topic. Boy, we threw in a lot of
We did.
fabulous names there, didn't we?
Mm.
Well, if you're hunkering down, those are the movies to watch: Music Man, The Strange Loves of Martha Ivers, In Harm's Way, anything from the Kirk Douglas collection. Go ahead, go
Yeah.
watch it.
Music Man was one of my favorite because it was 76 trombones, and that was my number of my football jersey in high school. That was 76. Because I
Well,
was a,
I was honored in 2003 to play Professor Harold Hill in a local production, Los Alamitos production
mm,
of The Music Man. That was a lot of fun.
we'll have
I'll
to talk.
bet you were terrific.
Well, I kind of patterned my approach to Robert Preston because I had seen Dick Van Dyke on stage. I seen Van Johnson on stage, all performing Professor Harold Hill, but there was just no one like Robert Preston.
Yeah. Yeah.
Manny, could you remind us where people can see your archives and maybe find a copy of your book?
Well, a copy of my book series, I have 3 books. Forgotten Hollywood book series can be found on Amazon. And of course, you can read any of my blogs for free at forgottenhollywood.com. I've got over 2,100 blogs.
Love them.
Posted there, yeah.
John?
Well, it's time for me to say thank you all for watching, and thank you all for letting us help you celebrate your Act Two. We'll see you next time.
For more on Celebrating Act Two, visit our webpage, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and tell your friends. Celebrating Act Two is the user manual for the second half of your life.